So Richard Rose, I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn, and I was so impressed with your depth of knowledge, and I love what you share on there. So I just felt so compelled to bring you on and just pick your brain a little bit about this wonderful plant that I've come to love so much.
Yeah.
And it's funny because 20 years ago, I really took an interest in hemp, and I'm not even sure what sparked it. And of course, that was in the earlier days of the internet for me. And I remember going to the library and just doing so much research and finding all this great stuff I wanted to read. And I had this huge box, this massive box of stuff I had printed off from the library
Yeah.
back then. Because I was so unbelievably interested in this plant. There was just something compelling me to learn more about it. And that was then, and then life gets in the way, and it just kind of fell to the side. And here I am again. I'm right back into this world. And, for me, it became a health issue that brought me to hemp. And so I am just totally 100% an advocate now for this plant because it literally saved my life this past winter. So I love what you're doing to educate people. I know you say you're retired, but yeah, but as you said, you still like to share lots of information. You're still an educator, I can see. So if you don't mind, Richard, could you give us some background on you? I looked at your bio and it is so extensive. Are you one of these, and I have to ask though, are you one of these guys who started out as sort of the hippie guy that was all pro marijuana and then it kind of led into this hemp world, or how did it all sort of come about?
Yeah, up until a couple of years ago, I had long hair. So I guess I was one of those long hair types back then. But the main difference with me compared to most others in the industry is that I already had about, let's see, 14 years. I had been making soy foods already, over 100 tofu products, and international distribution, national distribution. They were in Trader Joe's. I had a cheese called Tofarella. It was in all the supermarkets in Canada and the US. We exported it to Europe and was on the Inc. 500 and of the 500 fastest growing small businesses in 1993. And then in 1994, I pivoted from soybean as the protein source in my products to hemp seed. And the first product was Hemprella. I was doing the cheeses, Tofarella, Ricerella, Veganrella, Almondrella. And so I did Hemprella. And it was a cheese alternative. And at the same time, I introduced Hemp Bay Burger, which was a tempeh burger made with 10% shelled hemp seed, hemp nut. At that time, it was still whole hemp seed. And I introduced those at the big Natural Food Trade Expo in Baltimore in September of '94. And we had people 3 deep at our booth to taste these new products. We had big signs, had a big pot leaf, all this stuff. And right on the package itself, it had a neon green, about 2-inch high leaf against a dark purple background. So it was pretty recognizable, and people either loved it or hated it right away. The largest natural food distributing company in the country loved it. Whole Foods hated it. They said it was a political statement. And ironically, so did Ocean Beach People's Food Co-op, which is a worker-owned co-op, organic foods co-op. They also said it was a political statement and they wouldn't carry it. I pretty quickly got national distribution. I got distribution all over Canada. Canada was a third of my business at the time anyway. So it got into Safeway and A&P and Loblaws and all those chains and health food chains also. And that's how I started. I did a hemp hummus earlier in '94, but it bombed. But it established pre-DSHEA use of hemp stock in a food for DSHEA purposes, which grandfathers it in. And then in '96, I'd been working for those 2 intervening years on trying to shell the hemp seed, because to me the shell was the biggest drawback of hemp seed. And I was at a trade fair in Germany, and this guy handed me just a baggie of shelled hemp seed and didn't say anything. He just wanted to say if I knew what it was and what I would say, to see if, just to test me. And I look at it, and my eyes got big, and my mouth dropped. Oh, holy moly, you did it. I want it. Give it. I want to buy it. I got so excited. And I was like the only one the whole weekend, I guess, who understood the ramifications of what was in that bag. And I got really jazzed. And so we made a deal right before I left Germany to start importing it. So I was the first to import shelled hemp seed, hemp hearts as you call them now. Back then we called it hemp nut, and I was the first by 2 or 3 years to do it. Everyone thought it was illegal. I'd get arrested. It couldn't be done, shouldn't be done, and all this stuff. And I just ran off and did it anyway. And I packaged it and did what's now called hemp protein powder back then as well, using the pressed cake from oil making. We called it flour because it was too low in protein to really call it a protein powder, I believe, even today. And ended up doing 15 products that were all branded under the Hemp Nut brand. Oil and lip balm and the burger, cheese, a bar, a cookie, some essential oil that smelled like walking into a grow room, and flour. You could put it in foods or perfumes, things like that. And that was how I pivoted to hemp from soybean.
It's very interesting to me because it was so long ago, and I kind of would have had, I think, the same reaction as some of those other people. Oh, you're going to be arrested. This is illegal. So what you're telling me then is that it wasn't illegal back then, or were you living sort of in the gray area?
Well, all the lawyers I talked to said don't do it, and all my advisors said don't do it. So that, of course, made me think I should do it. I can read as well as the next person, and I read the Controlled Substances Act, and basically there's an exemption in there for hemp stock and non-viable hemp seed and things made therefrom. So this was non-viable hemp seed because it had been shelled. Once the shell's taken off, it's not going to, after a couple of days, it's not going to grow. And that was what was happening until then, is the whole hemp seed was being sterilized so that it won't grow, won't be viable, to be legal. And that's what I was doing for the foods up until I started doing the hemp nut shelled hemp seed. And so even though there wasn't technically a sterilization step done, I believed that it was still non-viable because of the shelling. So I went ahead and imported it, and I never had a problem. I never had a problem in customs. I never had a problem, in the 6 years that I did it, 8 years that I did it, I never had a problem at customs or with FDA or with DEA, not with the state of California Health Department, not with people failing drug tests and blaming me. None of that stuff happened. It was smooth sailing. And I can only attribute that because we were an already existing business with that were well known in the industry, and as an innovator and a company to watch. So we had professionals handling our logistics, our transportation from Europe. And, if you do things professionally, things didn't tend to go smoother. And so we didn't have any problem. We never had a seizure. We never had a shipment returned. We never had a notice from FDA or any of that. So
how is that different today then? Because it seems like it seems like it's legal, but it's not, and people are still, there's still fear around it, especially now that I'm sort of more in this CBD oil world, because that's what's really drawn me for the medicinal purposes. But have we made any headway since the time that you were starting, like pioneering this? Basically, have we made a lot of headway?
Yeah, we have. I had the advantage of being early, so it kind of flew under everybody's radar, I think. And then with CBD, it started stepping on a lot of toes. I was just trying to disrupt the soybean industry. I wanted 15% of the soybean for food market. Was my goal with the shelled hemp seed. I had certified organic selling for $1.70 a pound. And I thought I could disintermediate 15% of food soya by using shelled hemp seed, hemp nut. I still do, but the prices are too high now. What's happened with CBD is it started stepping on a lot more toes, a lot bigger toes. Big pharma, FDA had more of an interest in it. So in 2004, the HIA versus DEA lawsuit, which was knocking around since 2001. They finally filed in 2003, but it was decided for HIA, and it meant that there could be any amount of THC in hemp seed oil or foods or products. As long as it was from hemp, THC was legal because it was never actually, the natural cannabinoids have never been actually scheduled by Congress. So that made it legal for THC to be in hemp seed oil, even enough to get a DUI in Colorado or in Canada.
This was at a federal level?
Yeah, that was a Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. HIA sued DEA. DEA tried to legalize hemp food in 2001 with its interpretive rule, and HIA, the fiber group, saw it as a way of pretending the narrative that DEA was trying to ban hemp foods, when in fact they were trying to legalize them. Because Vote Hemp was new, and they wanted to, make a big brouhaha over it. I welcomed it because I was raising millions of dollars, and the first question every investor asked was, "Is this legal to DEA?" And once DEA answered that unequivocally in writing with the interpretive rule, life would have been a whole lot easier for those of us importing and doing hemp food. So I welcomed the rule. The fiber group sued on it. The result was THC in hemp products was legal. A few years later comes along CBD, and the same ruling applies to all cannabinoids. So it's the same legal principle. Hemp is legal, therefore THC is legal because it was never actually scheduled, natural THC. Same with CBD. So that the HIA versus DEA 2004 Ninth Circuit ruling protected CBD companies across the country, and that's I think the reason for the boom and the lack of litigation or prosecution is because of that ruling.
So does that still ruling, Richard?
What's that?
Does that still apply today? Like, is that still the rule today?
Well, that's the rule, except that the Farm Bill in 2014 changed it from no maximum THC to 0.3 or 3,000 parts per million. So the Farm Bill actually was the first time there was a limit after that ruling on THC in hemp products. But it could have been a lot. It could have been 10% THC in a hemp product and been legal right up until then. And it's still true today. The recent litigation, HIA versus DEA. HIA lost that. I knew they would. And the thing is the DEA has made really clear that that's only for their licensees. So if you have a DEA 225 permit or a 224 permit or whatever, you got to use their number. That's all it is. The associations, the lawyers, they all need the companies to, fear and disruption in the marketplace work to their advantage. That's how they drive membership and new clients, is if everybody's afraid and everybody is unsure of what's legal and what isn't legal, the associations and the lawyers mop up. And that's a lot of why people are so confused today. The media doesn't help because they just parrot whatever somebody's paid to tell them, and even if it's wrong. And you know, I write about this stuff, and I write about, you know, the reasoning and links to stuff, because I want people to do their own research and not just rely on Leafly or, you know, herb.co or something to get their news, because it's inevitably not in context. It doesn't have other points of view, and it's just somebody's paying a PR agent to give them these stories. And so they do it, and then they spread like wildfire. Wow.
That really, I mean, I'm happy. But what I find interesting too about what you said is that the DEA, as far back as, did you say 2003 or 2000 and something, they wanted it to be?
2001, they tried to legalize hemp food.
Really?
Yeah.
Because most people, I think, have this impression that the DEA is just, you know, they're just all over, you know, arresting anybody they can that's associated with hemp. So that's surprising to me.
Yeah, you have to remember that in that 2004 decision, the Ninth Circuit Court permanently enjoined DEA from enforcing the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 on hemp. They are permanently enjoined. So that's why they've been really silent on this. They haven't gone after anybody. Ryan Laughlin grew a hemp crop in Colorado the year before the Farm Bill. He did it. Ryan could have been popped by DEA and had his entire ranch taken away and spent the rest of his life in prison, because the Farm Bill wasn't until the next year. So he stepped up and did it, and DEA didn't do anything to him. DEA didn't do anything to Cannabis. They didn't do anything to CW. They haven't done anything to anybody because they're permanently enjoined from enforcing the CSA on hemp.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for saying that, because that is really, you saying that, I think, is really going to rock some worlds for some people who I know will be watching this, because there is so much confusion and it's so hard to know what's true and what isn't. And even if you ask a lawyer, they're not even sure what's real and what isn't.
Yeah, I posted about 5, maybe 6 legal opinions from different law firms. One is one of the top FDA law firms, and they all say the same thing. You know, they all say just what I said. And that being said, growing hemp is actually, in 8 states, growing recreational marijuana is more legal than growing hemp. So all of the rec legal states, all the adult use legal states, it's easier and more legal for you or me to grow a few plants, pot plants, than any hemp at all, without, because it demands registration, it's research only, there's all these restrictions. California has the worst hemp law in the world that I've ever seen, right down to controlling that you can't prune individual plants, and that you have to have males, no female only, like it is in Colorado, and it can't be indoors, and it has to be a dense field planting, and has to be certified cultivars only, even though none exist for Southern California. And it's, you know, the people protecting investments in Canadian hemp have made sure that hemp isn't going to be grown easily in this country for quite a while.
How does that relate to Canadian hemp? Explain that to me.
Well, they started growing hemp up there in 98, and over the years, companies and investors invested money in Canadian hemp. They also control the lobbying and the stuff down here. So when they went and lobbied hemp bills, they lobbied hemp bills that protected their investments in Canada.
Wow. That's
The
very
only one that they didn't is Colorado's. And Colorado got legal through Amendment 64 in I guess it was 2010 or 2012. And that was a pre-Farm Bill, 10th Amendment states' rights, type of hemp bill. West Virginia is the only other one to really have a 10th Amendment, which is where they ignore the federal government. They don't. There's nothing like like in California. Previously, the hemp law before Proposition 64 was that nothing could happen till the feds legalize. Well, that's not 10th Amendment. That's not states' rights. That's the state deferring to the feds. Whereas in Colorado, they just said, oh, screw the feds. This is legal. It's in the Constitution. So it's a constitutional imperative for the bureaucrats there to stand up to DEA or the feds in general.
I find it very interesting, Richard, that Canada's had that kind of impact, to be honest with you, because as a Canadian, I find that we tend to follow along with what the Americans are doing. And so it's a very interesting sort of like reverse of like power, really. That's very interesting.
You have to understand also in Canada, they're one reason they've been doing this, they've been still trying to keep us slow down, is they know that Canada Hemp's biggest customer will almost overnight become its biggest competitor, and they're trying to slow that as much as possible. But also Canada doesn't allow their farmers to harvest the CBD. CBD is all plowed under. You plow under billions of grams a year, 1 billion grams a year into the soil that's lost because you can't harvest the CBD from hemp in Canada. Now that's supposed to change in July 1st.
What purpose can't they harvest it?
Because the Health Canada doesn't let them. It's a Health Canada rule. They can do seed, which is in the tops, but they can't harvest tops for smoking or the CBD and the trichomes in the tops.
And to me, I just go, like, I'm a health practitioner too, and I just go, okay, that is so disgusting because we have so many, I mean, we're like anywhere else, but we have so many sick people that could use this medicine. And instead we're just plowing it under billions and billions of it. Like.
Yeah, the other thing is that if the hemp farmers that are farming today, if they had their expectations of returns per acre that they have for seed and fiber, they're not doing fiber, so just seed. The same return per acre in CBD would drive the price down to 5 cents per gram of CBD, not $5 a gram, 5 cents per gram. So it would totally crash the CBD market if they were allowed to, and if they had in the same profit expectations per acre, it would be 5 cents a gram. And that's super low. And it looks like they're going to have to grow and sell CBD only for the licensed producers up there, LPs. And so I don't think that'll happen, but it was conceivable if it had happened a couple years ago in a slightly different way, that you would be seeing CBD for 5 or 10 cents a gram today.
And the only thing preventing that is that supply and demand, right? It's economic. They're trying to keep.
No, the only thing preventing that is Health Canada.
It is so contrary because they're Health Canada. Aren't they supposed to be concerned with people's health?
No. I've dealt with Health Canada since 1986. I started importing tofurella to Canada in 1986, and I've had joint ventures up there for production, for the cheeses and other things. And we had massive distribution. We were in all the supermarket chains. We were in all the cheese distributors. We were all in all the natural food chains. And Health Canada and the provincial ministries did everything they could to stop us from selling a cholesterol-free, low-fat cheese alternative into supermarkets.
Oh, of course.
We had like 3 law firms up there dealing with this, and we had parents of lactose intolerant kids, crying on the phone that they wanted this for their daughter's birthday party so she could be normalized and not be the weird one in her group and be able to eat cheese on a pizza and stuff like that. And Health Canada was not helpful, and the OMAFRA, the old Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agriculture, was not helpful. And our competitors in the dairy industry would file trade complaints routinely against us, which would Safeway or A&P or whoever would take us all off the shelf. They'd wait a month and put it all back on the shelf. And because they knew it was a good seller, they knew people wanted it, they wanted to sell it. But OMAFRA or whoever would come in and say, no, you got to take that off. So they take it off, wait a little while, and put it back up.
So it's really, it was, I mean, I was going to ask you before you even said it, I wondered if the dairy industry was behind it. Canada's very protective of its dairy industry. And I know that it's even an issue for people if they cross the border and want to buy cheaper dairy in the States and bring it across, they have heavy, heavy duties on it now. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But, and this is the same.
They have these laws up there, each province has them, that you can't make a dairy product with vegetable fat. So they had all those same laws down in the U.S., and in the 50s and 60s, they got struck down one by one in each state as unconstitutional, and it never happened up there. So British Columbia totally couldn't care less, and the reason why is a lot of the people in the ministries of agriculture came up through the dairy industry. So they're old dairymen who became director of the ministry or whatever, and they're doing it for their buddies. They're not even really doing it as a bureaucrat. They're doing it because they came up through the dairy industry.
Wow. So when you say that in BC they don't care, you mean that? Explain that to me, because I don't think I completely followed that.
They were more consumer oriented and health oriented than say Montreal. Quebec was really the worst, and Ontario second. But British Columbia, they kept trying to file trade complaints, and British Columbia said, yeah, people want this stuff and they're selling it, so we're not going to shut them down.
Yeah, well, I'm in British Columbia right now, and let me tell you, it's a free-for-all, really, in a lot of ways up here. I mean, they just kind of go, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. And even with cannabis, I mean, like there's a dispensary, like there's several on every street,
All illegal, right?
It's all illegal, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So now you see the former narcs and drug squad leaders in your police departments getting into the LPs, and people like Mark and Jody have to sit on the sidelines. The people who brung you to the dance, who got it legal, aren't allowed to participate, and they're saving it for their buddies, the narcs and the cops and
really
urban drinkers. Yeah, they're not letting Mark Emery have a dispensary, or Jody Emery even have a coffee shop without any weed sales. It's that bad up there.
Wow. It's funny because people really don't know. Like, people really don't understand. Well, I think maybe what it boils down to is they don't know the history. But it's just baffling to me, and honestly, I even asked myself this morning, I'm like, are you wanting to really be in this space because you just want to be angry all the time? because it is infuriating the more you learn about it and the history of it and currently what's happening. And it just blows my mind that after all these years, we're still fighting up against this. And to me, it just makes sense. Just free the damn plant.
Yeah.
But I can
so far, nobody has done that, and nobody's going to do that. They're all going to do it so that their buddies can make money, as much money as possible on it. This whole idea of regulating like tomatoes is totally lost on them, and they're not going to do it. Not one state has done it that way. Not one country, not even Uruguay has done it that way. Not even Netherlands.
So I don't want to get too discouraged, but I am a little bit. So I just wondered if you can you give me a reason to believe that something positive might come out of all of this sometime in the near future? And it doesn't have to be specifically Canada, but are you seeing the shift happening, or are we going to be in this fight for a really long time?
I think as long as people can grow enough plants for themselves, and as long as people can be taken care of as patients somewhere with either a neighbor or somehow, I think it's okay. But if everything has to go through a retailer, a licensed producer as you have there, or a dispensary as you have in the States, it's never really going to be workable for patients and consumers. They're trying to balance their budget woes on the backs of the stoner and patient. And at some point, people will just get tired of it, either the high taxes, or that kind of stuff, and they're just going to revolt or change the law. I want to see it just, there's no reason for it to be any different than tomatoes or eggplant or anything else. It's just being made unnecessarily difficult by governments who just a few years ago would be more than happy to put you away for life or poison you with paraquat. So I think that this is a necessary incremental step to getting to where we want to get to, but we got to do this first to show that it's not really that workable, and keep moving towards normalization, which is the ultimate goal.
And how far out do you feel that is? Like, are you talking like, maybe a year or two? Are we talking like 50 years down the road? Like, how far out do you realistically see this potentially? Like, I guess what you're talking about is ultimately for the plant to just be free, to just be considered another herb or another vegetable or however. So how far out are we from that?
I think in the US, it depends on what the feds do and when they do it. So there's even our friends in Congress want to do silly things like put it into Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for regulation. It's nothing like any of those. And the feds have no compelling interest in this. In a plant that's grown locally within the state and is sold within the state. Justice Thomas even said so in the Raich case. He said that the federal government can now regulate quilting bees and bingo games, they said, because things that are wholly intrastate and not interstate, and it makes a mockery of the founding fathers' principles of the powers of the federal government are limited and few, and the powers of the state government are large and varied. So we'll see what happens with the feds. Now, if they just do like HR 1227 from a Republican in Virginia, if they do that, it'll just be descheduled. There'll be no federal involvement, it looks like. The feds don't have any compelling reason. As long as it's not being transported interstate, it's not a federal jurisdiction other than imports and FDA. And maybe USDA. USDA USDA has a long and storied history, Department of Agriculture, with hemp before 1937. So every year they put out a magazine about agricultural production the year before, and hemp was always in it. One of the bigger hemp researchers in the 20s was a USDA employee, Leicester Dewey. So USDA is the proper agency to do anything if the feds have to be involved.
So again, in your opinion, how far out do you think we are from this?
I don't think we're going to see normalization for, like in California, I don't think we'll see it for 10 years. In Colorado, once these bureaucracies tend to expand, they do not tend to contract. So even in California, where they so-called legalized it, they're hiring more police just to enforce marijuana laws in Sacramento. So I don't think we're going to see any bureaucracy shrink. I don't think we're going to see any budgets shrink. Even narc squads aren't going to, it's going to take a real revolution to wrest it away from the regulators once they have a $5 million agency and they're making, $100 million a year in taxes and they're able to slap people when they want to and for technical violations it's just not, it's going to be really hard to take that away from them. And it may never happen. It just might be, it just might be such that they set it up so that they never have to let go. I thought we would see police department budgets get slashed after legalization. And instead, in Colorado, they're using marijuana tax money to go after unlicensed grows, which are legal and constitutional in Colorado. They're just not licensed, and that's still legal there, especially patient grows. So the near term doesn't look so great. And if you look at California, it looks even worse. But I'm hopefully after maybe 10 years, when a lot more people are using it, people will say this is, enough's enough. Or when everybody has 4 plants in their backyard or whatever, they might just say enough is enough. But we still have people controlling who can give haircuts and who can do nails and, silly things like that. Who can do a massage? You got to get 500 hours in the school to give you a piece of paper before you can give someone a massage.
It's even worse than that.
Yeah, right.
And regulation.
None of these bureaucracies are, I wouldn't be surprised if there's still technically a commission on horseless carriages or something, buggy whips or something like that. And they just don't, governments hate reducing their bureaucracies. And the natural inclination is always to expand budget and personnel and influence.
Yeah. Wow. Well, honestly, Richard, I mean, I don't know whether to be angry or sad or both.
It gives you a great opportunity to grow, to expand, to include these things that you don't like. And it's the way it is, so you might as well accept it. Now, it doesn't mean you stop working to change it, but you also don't get too upset because it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
There's still people in prison for life for possession, simple possession. So
how do you foresee them dealing with that? Because we've talked about that in our family, because we don't know someone personally, but we know someone who's a brother of someone we know who was put in jail he's in the States, he was put in prison for life just for having the paraphernalia, not even having the marijuana on him. And I'm just like, something's really off about this. So what do you think they're going to do? Are they going to let these people out if they legalize? Like, how are they going to be able to deal with that? Like, it just seems.
Yeah, California was the first one to have this interesting provision that was basically if someone was in state custody for simple possession and no other crime, and nonviolent, no guns and stuff, they could actually be released from jail. And I think that happened to a few. They allowed expungement of records. Colorado did not do that. So we still have people in prison in Colorado. There might be some lifers, I don't know specifically, but there's no expungement of records in Colorado, and there's nobody getting out of jail because of the laws change. But there are still people, Oklahoma or Texas, being put away today for simple possession. One guy, I think, for 2 joints, black guy, of course. So they throw the book at him, and there's, that might be the only good thing to come out of Proposition 64, is that some people got let out of jail and everybody can get their record expunged.
So, Richard, can you explain to me, because I know you use the word revolution, and that's the word that keeps coming to my mind lately, because I'm always bouncing this off my husband, and I'm always talking about it, and I'm just like, we need a revolution. But I'm trying to picture in my mind how that revolution would have to look, how that revolution would actually have to unfold if it were to happen. Do you have a picture in your mind the way that revolution would have to occur in order to really get any real sustainable, marked changes with this, with this situation?
If our society and our government can ever become humanistic again, it could happen. But you got to realize that we had a revolution here in the last election. We got an orange, a fake tanned, fake haired, a sexual predator liar for president. I think once after Trump, literally anybody over the age of 35 is fit to be president. We used to hold high ideals for that position. So I consider that the revolution I wanted since the 70s. It's just a lot uglier than I wish it was, and less humanistic, but it's really a revolution. Something's going to snap, and either it's, Democrats sweep this November, or it's, Trump legalizes. I posted the other day that could be Trump's October surprise, which is October surprise. There's a history in presidential campaigns of one of the candidates pulling some ace off their sleeve in October, just before the early November election. So his October surprise could be legalization. One of his advisors is Roger Stone, who's involved in the marijuana industry, different levels. And, I wouldn't be surprised if Stone is bending his ear and, saying, look, all these people that won't vote for you, you'll get them to vote for you if you legalize, you promise to legalize, or something like that. So that could happen. I think to get the revolution we want is just going to take such a change in politics that I don't see it happening, short of pitchforks and storming the palace and Bastille Day all over.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Trump possibly, like doing this October surprise, because I know that in Canada, Trudeau's lost a lot of because people think he's kind of acting like a child, and he's, he's being very interesting lately. I don't know what the word is for it, but I said the same thing. I said, probably the best thing Trudeau could do at this point is really push for legalization and make it happen in this term, because he may never get back in. And I think that if he were to do that, then people might actually have some restored faith in him. So It would be interesting too to see if he were to do that in Canada.
Yeah, I thought Obama was going to do it. I mean, I held out hope right up until his end of his term. It was like, oh, tomorrow he's going to announce it. I was literally like, that expectational that he was going to, because, you know, he's maybe the world's most famous stoner. I mean, he used to smoke a lot of weed, and he and Clinton, both, and Bush for that matter, all betrayed us. They all are former stoners, and none of them legalized. And you know, I was pushing for Obama to do it, and he just wouldn't pull the trigger and do it. And he had, you know, they even had a review. They did the process about the right time, where I said, oh, this is about the right time, where if they come back and say deschedule, it's, you know, it'll happen in this term and blah, blah, blah. And instead they said no change. So, you know, if we can't get Obama to do it, I don't know if we're going to be able to get anybody to do it. Maybe if we elect a libertarian, because the libertarians are the only ones who have the ideological mindset to be cool with reform.
Yeah, there's even a bit of, apparently we have a libertarian party in Canada now, or it's a similar ideologically. I don't know if it's called libertarian, but you know, because their premise basically is a lot less government involvement, right? So certainly in this case, we need a lot less government involvement. But I just want to go back to the whole revolution thing, if you don't mind, because I mean, again, I'm a health practitioner. I've seen so many people suffer over the years, and it literally just, I just look at it and I go, this is so unnecessary. It is so completely unnecessary. And like I said, because I went through my own really major health issues in the last couple of years, and finally opened my mind up to taking cannabis oil, and it literally saved my life. I'm a huge advocate now. I'm not backing down from it. I want everyone to get this powerful plant into their lives because we need it. And I have to wonder if, you know, if maybe we can get enough people to experience the power of this plant from a medicinal standpoint, and let so many people experience that to the point that the thought of it not being available to them anymore might make them rise up and say, hell no, we're not going to sit back and let the government control this anymore, because we have an endocannabinoid system for a reason. We need these cannabinoids in our bodies. And I don't know, like, I guess that's my idealistic vision of maybe that we'll have enough parents who are sick of watching their children be ill or dysfunctional or die, and they'll say, no more, we're done. We're not going to sit back and take this shit anymore. And I guess, again, that's sort of my idealistic, my vision. But do you think that's even reasonable to be even thinking that way?
Yeah, what you're holding out for is the 100th monkey phenomenon applied to this. So I agree. I think that people like you, and there's thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people like you across North America in the last year hearing about cannabis oil or CBD oil or THC helping this relative or that relative, or helping this person or that person. The biggest move, I think, towards legalization happened from CBD in the last few years, because it was no longer just the bastion of stoners and long hairs anymore. It was also children with Tourette's and Vietnam War and war vets and people with PTSD, and we're hearing about it being good for this, and this person with cancer sent home to die and is still here, outlives the cancer doctors, and things like that. And then one day there will be a tipping point, and there will be, the right people will have the right influence, and they'll say, this is enough. My sister uses this and has no problems, and that we got to change this, and things like that. It's happened in Australia recently. It's about to happen in the UK. And it's starting to happen. I mean, it happened in Thailand. Let me think. There's a couple other nations that were unusual, peculiar legalizing. Oh, Colombia.
They legalized, meaning like
no, they legalized. They legalized cannabis in Colombia and Thailand for medical and exports. You know, Jamaica. It's the cat's out of the bag. The snowball's rolling down the hill, and I would say to have faith and realize it might be darkest before the dawn.
Yeah, I get that. I really do. I get that that's kind of the transition period. Like we have to go through all that. And I agree with you about someone being in a very high position of influence that will finally go, no, you know what? My brother had cancer and he took cannabis oil and it saved his frigging life and he's still here. So guess what, people? We need to do something to bring this, you know, to normalize this and make it so that everyone has access to this medicine. And that's exactly what I just said to my husband yesterday. I said, I really think it's going to take some really high level official to have that experience directly themselves or through a family member or someone else that they love. That's going to make them turn the tide and go, okay, this is it. This is what we're just doing this.
Orrin Hatch is a senator from the conservative state of Utah, Mormon state, and he's the one who got dietary supplements legalized and off the FDA's hit list in 1994. And this is his last term. He's not going to run again. And I was just, he knows about CBD. He even actually wrote a pro CBD oil editorial. So I was hoping before he leaves, he might get some push at the federal level to give us our DSHEA, like the dietary supplement people got 24 years ago.
So I know that things are a little different in Europe, and I know you're in Europe right now. Can you explain to me because I know that hemp has a very long history in Europe, and my understanding is it's always been used, it's always been consumed. Can you explain to me the difference between Europe and what we're dealing with in North America?
Well, in hemp, it's much freer. It's not designed to, there's no research only like in the U.S. They mandate certified cultivars. And they test for THC, but CBD is much more available, and in medical, you can go into a lot of. So in Italy, for instance, you can go into a pharmacy with the right prescription and go to the right pharmacy, and you can buy cannabis from Bedrocan. And now I think Tilray, maybe one of yours, one of the Canadians. And there's programs like that in a lot of the countries. They're in Spain, it's kind of super legal. There's cannabis buyers clubs. There's hundreds, if not thousands of them, where people can go in and buy and hang out and smoke, like in Amsterdam. So it's Croatia, a lot of them are starting to legalize for medical. Germany just did, Poland, Croatia. And there's a lot more of a revolution happening here than in the States that way. The big, the Washington, D.C. of Europe is Brussels where the European Union is centered. And they still aren't on board, but the individual countries have more power to do what they want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what is the reason then? Are they so much more evolved in their thinking in these countries, or have they clued into the fact that they can actually profit a lot from the taxes involved with allowing this, or what's the reason really? Yeah, they're
smaller. And, Netherlands is 15 million people. That's like half the population of California. That's like the population of LA. So consequently, it's easier to go in and talk to them and get changes happening than it is in the US. When you have a country of 330 million and the only people that have access are the rich and the lobbyists and the corporations, they're not going to be responsive. But these small countries have have a obligation to be responsive. And Switzerland's about to legalize for adult use, I believe. And these are all. I mean, the biggest country is Britain or Germany at 80 million. So you have different federal versus state relationships in each country. You can sort of venue shop, like if you want to grow hemp and do a certain project, if Spain says no, you can go to Portugal. If they say no, you can go to Holland. If they say no, you can go to Italy. If they, you can find a venue easier here. But I think that at the end of the day, they're just more responsive to the needs of the constituency than we'll ever find in the U.S.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. It really does. So I wonder then, because these countries are smaller and they're geographically smaller too, are they having experience of like not being able to meet demand because they can't grow enough there? Do they import a lot? Like what's the situation in Europe generally?
Yeah, they're trying to not grow within the country. The first step they're going to do is import from Tilray or whoever in Canada. That's they're doing in Italy. They're doing in Portugal. One of your LPs actually has a grow going into Portugal. It's so much easier for the regulator to just say import and not have to set up a regulatory scheme for growing it there. But that's going to change. I mean, at some point, people are going to say we're spending a lot of money on Canada. Why don't we do it here? It's just, there's a lot of miles between Canada and Germany, say, or Greece. So it's a safe first step that's really easy, and then they can look at it and decide later how to handle it.
Mm-hmm. It would. I mean, I'm just assuming here, but it would seem to make sense too that if Canada is a large exporter to Europe, to these countries that are legal, then maybe they will push for or encourage, if that's the word, Canada to sort of open up a little more too, so that they can feed that market a little bit better. Does that make sense?
Well, every country in the EU, including Brussels, has a mandate to try to keep the dollars home and not be sending it all back to Canada for a plant that grows pretty much anywhere in the world. It makes no sense for Germany to buy from Canada. There is weed being grown in every province in Germany, in every province in Italy, in every province in France, in every province in Spain. It's not like it doesn't exist and there's no technology and there's no know-how and there's no history. It's there already. They just have to legalize them however they need to and start using those local growers.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that gives me faith. I'm glad you used the word faith, because I do have faith and I am an optimistic person. But I'll be honest with you, like I told my husband the other day, I said, if something doesn't change here and things become even worse, because I know how regulated Canada is and can get, I said, we might have to find a place to go live where this is going to be more accessible, because now that I've experienced it, I will not go without it. I will not go without it. And just in the past few weeks, because I came out and I did live streams on Facebook and I told people this is what I did to heal myself. And so many people reached out to me and they're like, I need to do this too. And now that they have been adding CBD oil into their lives, they're terrified to go without it, because it has radically, literally within days, taken people's pain away, or made them so they could sleep. I mean, anxiety, depression gone. I mean, off their medications. Like, this is so unbelievably powerful. And I do feel deeply responsible to not just myself and my family, but to my clients, to people that I shared this with. And it really concerns me that now that they are on the other side and they have experienced a level of health that they didn't experience before. I just think it's so cruel, actually. And you use the word, there's a lack of humanity here, and there is, but it's so cruel to think that these people can't just be allowed to take a plant that really is just a natural herb that grows here, that they can't just take it and be well. Like, and so I seriously was like, okay, do I stay here long term and keep moving forward? And I'm not saying I lead the charge, because I'm just a newbie here. Like, I'm just someone who had a great experience, and now I need to, share that. But it's a question that's already on my mind. Do we stay here and be a part of this transition? God knows how long it will take. Or do we just go find a place where we can be, because we don't mind moving anywhere, where we can be more free? Because personally, freedom is the number one value in my life. So thank you for saying that. And at the same time, I think maybe this is a personal issue I need to work through and decide, how far I'm willing to go with it. But I'm encouraged by what you said. I really am. And I guess I just want things to happen faster.
Yeah, well, I've been advocating for 46 years, so that's why I have a reputation for having a sharp tongue, and it's because I know where their bullshit is, where the bullshit is, and I've been doing this so long, and I'm 61, and I'm just running out of years to watch the bullshit continue. So I'm pretty pointed with my comments, and
I appreciate that, to be honest with you, Richard. I really do appreciate that from you. I do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really can't do it any other way. But, at this point, if I understand consumer behavior. I studied it in university, and I know that if I beat around the bush, people aren't going to get it. Whereas if I come right out and say it and say it in a pointed way, provocative even, people will listen, but they won't listen otherwise. So I call a spade and let the chips fall where they may. But if I keep beating around the bush, it's just going to take that much longer for people to realize things.
Yeah, and I think too that there is this, and it's certainly not just in hemp. I mean, this is all across the board. But I think that there's so much misinformation out there. And so much of it is intentional. And a few weeks ago, CBC did an article on CBD here in Canada, and it just bastardized it. And I just wanted to get a hold of the CBC and say, regardless of anything in there that might have been true, there were things that weren't true, and it very intentionally misleading. And more than anything for me, it's how can you sleep at night that you just made it more difficult for people to access this plant because of your very irresponsibly written article. Right. And because people are scared now that they're going to be put in jail for having CBD in their cupboard. And it's just so disgusting. And I personally feel the CBC should be sued. They should be held accountable, but they're not.
You have media standards up there like the UK does, and if CBC said something, you should file a complaint with that.
Well, I don't know that I'm in a position to be filing a complaint with CBC, but I would write a very nasty letter, and I would get a lot of people to write that same nasty letter because
you are in a position. You're a citizen. You have the right to say, CBC put out blatantly bad information, and I think they should be sanctioned for it, or something should happen. But UK has some of the worst propaganda I've seen in the last few years comes out of Britain, because they're going through a reefer madness phase right now, and they too have some advertising standards boards, and they have a mechanism to complain about such things there. But there's you have to understand that there is a market for misinformation. There is more money to be made in misinformation than in good information. Yeah. And if I wanted to join that, I would write clickbait articles and have clickbait, you know, FDA bans CBD today, you know, and or you know, CBD declared legal to yesterday by a court, you know, or some whatever, you know, all those kinds of clickbaity, breathless articles about this or that. There's money to be made there, and if I just write the kind of things I write, there's no money. I mean, I'm not trying to do this to make money, but all the media are doing it as a with profit motives. So they have a reason to write misinformation and disinformation and clickbait headlines and get it shared far and wide.
It is, and one regarding this article in particular. One of the people that they interviewed, or really the only person they interviewed, it seemed, was someone who, if you follow the money, they are affiliated to some pharmaceutical that's developing something to do with cannabis or whatever. Right. And I just went, all you gotta do is follow the money, guys. Like, but most people aren't gonna do that. They're just gonna see that article, and so many people still trust the CBC in this country. I don't know why. And they're just gonna believe what they interviewed a scientist, or they interviewed a very reputable individual. It must be true, right? And it's just like, oh, yeah, so frustrating.
Yeah, and you see that here. You see that in the States a lot too. But the thing is, the media first, what they do here is they lift you up. So they'll write glowing accounts of CBD helping children. Like CNN has done 4 documentaries now on it. Yeah. So the model is they lift you up and then they knock you down. And so at some point now, I'm expecting to see the anti-CBD stuff that'll start coming out of the media, and then it'll sort of settle down and normalize. But the media is kind of the biggest part of the problem. Things are only illegal because we as a society agree that something is legal or illegal. If we keep hammering home this point of view that this stuff is highly illegal, then it is. But if we started hammering home the point of view that this stuff is as legal as the laws on the books for sodomy, or the laws on the books for California has a law you have to honk your horn as you drive through a tunnel. Yeah, no one does it. So, it's equally illegal, but no one cares. And we got to get it to the point where no one cares.
Right. So it almost becomes sort of a redundant old law that they just aren't enforcing. So it's just, like nobody cares. Like that's what I said too when this article came out. We did a talk. We had a meeting about it with some other CBD lovers, and that's what I said too. I said, guys, I'm pretty sure there's still some laws where you can't ride your horse and buggy down Dundas Street in Toronto or something silly like that. But I mean, just because it's there doesn't mean it gets enforced or that it's even relevant to today,
Right, and that's why the people on our side constantly posting, DEA says this, FDA says that. Do us not any favors, because it keeps reinforcing the government's point of view, and I don't care. I don't need to know it. I don't want to know it. I don't know. We don't need to hammer that home every day. I'd rather hear about, loopholes and workarounds and people doing good and not constantly quoting DEA like it was Moses.
Yeah. Totally. So I think that the last thing that I want to, because I think we could keep talking. I know we could keep talking for a long time. But I think that the last thing I want to ask you is something along this line. If, as it is right now, with the laws in place as they are, and we'll just say in North America, if if a parent has a sick child and the cannabis oil is the only thing that has even touched, let's just say they have brain cancer, a child has brain cancer, and I have heard these stories of children, babies who had brain cancer and took this oil and they're fine now, okay? But they don't tell their doctor how it really happened. But because I know if I have a sick child, this mama is going to get whatever she has to for that baby, and it doesn't matter if it's illegal or not. Right. And I know that they're using a lot of fear tactics, because there are parents who are losing their children because they gave them cannabis oil and things like this. Like, we hear these stories all the time, especially out of the States. I don't hear it so much here in Canada, but my point is this. Do you feel that a parent with a sick, very sick child, we'll say deathly sick child with cancer, brain cancer, we'll say, do you feel that they should have to question whether or not they should get this medicine for their child simply because of this old law that is still in place, preventing them from just having free access to it? Do you think that they should have to choose between their child being well and breaking the law and potentially losing their child? I know the answer, but I really would like you to break that down for me, how you feel about that.
Yeah, there's two ways they can go. They can either not do it, follow the law, but not let their politicians get any rest behind it, or they can just do the thing that needs to happen and give them the oil, and maybe do the same thing, still advocate. There's even in Colorado, they're taking babies away from moms, and I know one, and she didn't smoke. She just used THCA in juicing fresh tops, not even THC, non-psychoactive THCA, the acid form, and had her child taken away upon birth. So not even a, quote, enlightened state like Colorado is doing the right thing here. The people that got a lot of movement politically in the States on cannabis and CBD, especially CBD, are parents of sick children. Us long hairs would talk to the politicians till we're blue in the face and get nowhere. And one child, unfortunately, seizing in the legislator's office, got them to sit up and write a new law. That it has that kind of power. If they can see the effect that the law has upon an actual human, especially if you could do a before and after or something, though, it's going to pull their heartstrings if they have any left, and there'll be an impetus for change. We saw that with a lot of politicians. Orrin Hatch was one, but Steve King was another. I think he's from Iowa, a Republican, and he keeps sponsoring CBD legislation. So we've seen it happen. I'm not a parent, so I really don't think I have an answer that should be relevant to it, because I'm not a parent, and I've never had to do that. And it's an intellectual exercise for someone like me because of that. But I've helped parents get materials they need, even though they're illegal, and it could be considered trafficking or interstate trafficking or whatever. And with the Medicinal Hemp Association in Colorado, my MHA, I gave away I don't know, maybe 200 to 300 clones of this super cultivar that was super medicinal. It was 10% CBD, 5% THC, 5% CBG. So it was a super medicinal cultivar that wasn't hemp technically, but still could do a lot of good in people's hands. So I gave away a bunch of cuts of that just to try to get medicine out. So it's a hard decision. Part of the problem is that people like me get away with a lot more than people who have darker skin do, or who are challenged in other ways. And so what's happening now in the States is that older or richer white people are getting away with breaking the law, and blacks and Hispanics are going to jail still.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the worst of all possible outcomes, because we still don't get the law changed. There's still people going to jail, but they're only going to jail because of their skin color.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's to me, that's the worst.
Yeah.
That's the worst outcome we can have, where the police turn their backs to white guys and go after black guys and Hispanics with a vengeance to make their quotas.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. And it's very, very clear in my mind, because this is what came to me a couple of weeks ago, is the revolution needs to come from the people who are using it medicinally, the people who are getting the results, the people who are not going to be willing to go without it because they're not going to watch their children suffer anymore, or they're not going to watch their loved ones suffer anymore, or themselves. And so I feel that that's really the revolution that I could be a part of, right? And even doing this and interviewing people and collecting all those stories and making sure that the stories get heard, because too many people are doing it underground because of fear. And, and there's so many thousands of people, I know it, many thousands of people that have healed themselves of a plethora of different kinds of diseases using this very powerful plant. But out of fear, they're not talking about it. And I know just from a couple months ago, sharing my story, it brought people out of the woodwork. I had people messaging me saying, "Thank you so much for saying it out loud, because I've been using it and it has helped me so much. And I just haven't had the courage to tell anybody." And we need to get beyond that.
And I think that those parents that we've been talking about might be in the best position to affect change. And the reason why is they're going to be able to speak with so much passion and power and eloquence about a real thing, not in something abstract, something intellectual, but a real thing, a human being, their child. And there's going to be a ton of power in that type of conversation that they can have that me not having a child couldn't have, for instance, and credibility for them also.
Yeah.
That they have to deal with this, and they've tried everything and nothing worked but this one magical plant. So they might have to be the leaders of the movement, and even willing to go to jail over it. There's a lot of power in that. When you look at Gandhi, he said, "Yeah, I'm willing to go to jail. I'm willing to starve to death." It will imbue them with power and credibility, and let people hear what they have to say, whose minds might be closed otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Richard, what I hear you saying, and I've heard you say it a couple times already, but is that we need to bring the humanness back to this topic, and not just this topic. We need to bring the humanness back to our politicians, to our government, to our legislators. We really need to open their minds and maybe through their hearts. And thank you for saying that, because that is really, I felt so strongly the last couple of weeks, that's the direction I needed to go in to help these stories get out. And so I will do my part. I absolutely will do my part from that perspective. And I thank you, because you paved the way. It's people like you and Rick Simpson, right, who were willing to break the law and willing to give this medicine away and willing to step up and say, we will not take this anymore, and we do want to see change, and we're willing to do whatever we have to do to make that happen. You were the trailblazer. And like I said, I'm just a newbie here. I was the person who was completely against cannabis growing up. I wouldn't smoke it. I drank, of course, recreationally, but I mean, I wouldn't smoke it. I came from a family of, you know, my sister smoked it and I didn't agree with it. And now I'm going, oh my God, they had a clue. I mean, yeah, they were stoners, but still, I mean, they had a clue. And I wasn't willing, and it took me really, honestly, it took me getting sick to finally truly go, okay, I need to just let this plant in my life. So I'm going to move forward in that direction and you know, help to push the revolution along. I know it's already happening, but I want to help to push it along. So thank you so much for giving me this time, because I feel actually very empowered by it and far less discouraged than I was an hour and a half ago. So thank you for that. And I'm going to continue to follow you as you post things on LinkedIn and continue your education of the masses, because it's still needed. It's definitely still needed. And I need people like you to educate me, because if I were to try to understand it all by reading, I definitely can't do it by reading clickbait articles, but I mean, even to dive into the research, it's just so overwhelming. So to have someone who's done the research and is so informed on the subject and just really cut right into the core of the issue, it makes things so much easier for me to feel confident moving forward in this. I'm going to call it a revolution, because that's really what it is, in this revolution. So thank you for blazing that trail. Really, like, seriously, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you. And if I want to talk to you again, would it be okay if I reach out to you again and say, hey, can we talk about this?
Yeah, we could do updates or whatever if you want. Yeah. Sure.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Richard.
My pleasure.